Welcome to the podcast, Tyler.
Wonderful to be here. Yeah, really excited to be talking to you.
Wonderful to have you here. Tyler Smith is an award-winning, festival-selected actor, filmmaker, writer, improviser, and teacher. As an actor, Tyler will be seen recurring in the second season of Made for Love on HBO Max and the upcoming thriller A Lot of Nothing. He has also appeared on Silicon Valley, Shameless, Snoop Dogg's music video, Lavender. I didn't know about that until I read that. Wow, I think I'm going to have to ask you a little bit about that.
Yeah, happy to just talk about it, yeah.
Yeah, and the award-winning TV pilot Family Heirloom. As a filmmaker, Tyler directed and edited the short film Lunch Break, a workplace dark comedy about sexism, written by and starring Mo Allen and Josh Server from Nickelodeon's All That. Shout out. I used to love that show.
Yeah, shout out to my wife too.
Yeah, shout out to your wife, Mo.
Yeah. Not Josh Server, yeah.
His list of accomplishments goes much longer than this, but I'll end by saying that with a BA in philosophy and an MFA in screenwriting, Tyler teaches film structure, creativity, and ideation, and TV genres for the University of Cincinnati. And he currently lives in Los Angeles with his wife, Mo Allen, in Pasadena.
That's right. That's right.
So, Tyler, I would like to start by asking a little bit about your upbringing. Did you grow up in a religious environment at all?
I did. Yeah, I was raised Catholic, but it was a very liberal Catholicism. I think my parents, they brought me up in the Catholic tradition. You know, I did First Communion, I did confirmation. In my, teen years, I was really involved with a church in Maryland, St. Rose of Lima. But I think that was always tempered with, always, critical thinking was also a big thing as well. And my family was always liberal. And so, as I grew older, I always thought like Catholics were like liberal minded. And and I'm ashamed to say that I thought Protestants were like, the conservative. But, as I learned, that conservative liberal spectrum is across all forms of religion. But for me, growing up, it was I had a really good experience with the Catholic Church. It was, I love the ritual, I love the music, I love the community, and there were strong familial ties too. My grandparents on my mom's side, they've been ongoing inspirations to me because they were kind of the social justice Catholics, grounded in giving voice to the voiceless and in the spectrum of Jesuit tradition. And so, and then they were a part of kind of a radical Catholic group called the Loretta Sisters. And so that was like kind of the atmosphere that was always swirling around me.
Yeah.
But my dad, he was very into science. I mean, my mom was a great appreciator of science, but my dad his day job was pharmaceutical research, but he's always a contemplative. He was always exhibiting a contemplative nature. So I think that was always, again, tempered, where we had our Catholic connection, but there was a great love of thinking and like contemplating. And sometimes that pulled us beyond the Catholic realm. And then I think ultimately that's what moved me away from Catholicism was, in college, I was a philosophy major, and there were some key classes that kind of took me outside of the Catholic realm.
Hmm.
but also kind of political things were edging me out of religion as well. So maybe I'll stop there, but that's kind of like everything in a nutshell.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, before we move on, can you say anything about the specific um, doubts that philosophy and the political sphere kind of, um, elicited
Yeah,
for you?
yeah, yeah. Well, philosophically, some of the class, I mean, I went into college already kind of with if I remember correctly, kind of the mindset that I took the Bible metaphorically, and saw it as spiritual truth, that
Hmm.
there were lessons that could, foster a good person, like,
Hmm.
cultivate a good person and someone
Hmm.
who serves and someone who's a part of community. But, kind of ultimately, I didn't buy into the doctrine and the theology. And so when I went into, you know, originally I wanted to be an astrophysicist major, but and I think, we could probably get into this later, but I think it was always grounded in awe and wonder. And I think
Hmm.
astrophysics, like there was that energy of awe and wonder. But I also got really involved with theater and the music program, and it
Hmm.
was too much for me to take on.
Yeah.
So the compromise was philosophy,
Hmm.
which still allowed me to exercise my brain and all that. But I took one philosophy class. It was called metaphysics, and my professor was like this gruff, wore tweed jackets, but almost like salt of the earth too, kind of a gruff intellectual, and he was very atheistic, very analytical. So I think he came in with, a strong bias. But
Hmm.
we went through all the, arguments for God, but then we went through all the arguments against God.
Hmm.
Um, and ultimately, he, again, I think he was biased, and he kind of landed us on the side of no God, or, there's
Yeah.
no proof of God's existence.
Hmm.
Um, and so, I think that was my sophomore year in college. So that was kind of formulating my new era, my new paradigm of belief system. But I think that was kind of matched with the political world at the time, or, in America, where Bush was running. And so this was, so I think it was already influencing my thought going into college. But, I think Bush ran in 2000, beat Gore, and then ran again in 2004. And I think I just became super aware of how religion was being used to, I don't know, to, uh, I hate to use strong language, but like manipulate and
Hmm.
exploit people so they will vote, and
Hmm.
kind of these wedge issues that get people emotionally charged.
Yeah.
But it's all influenced by religious language. and
Hmm.
and I think I was really turned off by the hypocrisy of it, and maybe the superficial nature of it.
Hmm.
And I don't know. I think that pushed me out of religion.
Yeah.
Kind of the distaste for that, and then I learned more about the Catholic Church, and kind of how they have a conservative spectrum, and obviously the hierarchy and
Hmm.
the abuses within the church. So
Hmm.
yeah, by the end of college, I was kind of like in the agnostic atheist spectrum.
Hmm.
And I think, in my 20s, I kind of just was, I don't want to say like anti-religion,
Hmm.
but I was like, that's not really for me.
Yeah.
But now in my 30s, I'm kind of forming a new understanding of religion, and not to put it in practical terms, but like the utility of
Yeah.
religion.
Yeah.
And so anyway, and I'm sure we'll get into that because we both share.
Yeah.
This is how we know each other's through the UU faith. But
Yeah, I know. I want to ask you more about you in a bit. So despite getting kind of despite pulling yourself out of religion, have you, did you, when you were a kid or a teenager or your college years or even after that, have you had any experiences that felt like spiritual experiences to you?
Yeah, I for sure. I mean, honestly, yeah, that church I went to, the Catholic Church in Maryland, Gaithersburg, Maryland, go East Coast, St. Rose of Lima. There was a really strong youth program there, and a lot of it was centered around service, and there would be these really great retreats, and one retreat was to go into DC and stay at the Catholic University campus for a week. And, there were day events of, religious oriented study, but it was still entertaining and fun for, teenagers. It was very community oriented, building community. But another component of it was serving. I was assigned, my group, we were assigned to a Goodwill to help out. It was like a Goodwill sorting facility where all the donations came through. And I was paired with a mentally challenged worker there, but he was like this big black man wearing a Superman t-shirt, and his nickname was Superman. And it was it was kind of a life-defining experience because he loved The Simpsons, and so we connected on this. That's how we connected. He was super sweet and just, but there was an innocence about him. And so we would just kind of go through all the Simpson quotes and catchphrases, and he'd be like, "Eat my shorts, man." And I'd be like, "Cowabunga, dude." But by the end of, it kind of got emotional, and even, I rarely think about it, but even thinking about it now, I get emotional just how that like exemplified the goodness of humanity, not to be too grand about it, but how I was put in a place where if you show up with good intentions and focus, how there is a sensation of transcendence. And and I just remember it, the more I got to work with him more and more, and ultimately never saw him again after that week. But by the end of it, there was a lot of contemplation and a lot of exercises. And again, the church did a really great job of kind of, I don't know, creating an epic, dramatic experience. So by the end of it, you're just fully mindful of what you're doing. And I remember there was just a huge banner that everyone drew on, and, this powerful, music is playing. And I drew the Superman sign on the banner.
Nice.
And I think there was, I'm always skeptical of memory, but, I feel like, I think there was kind of this language that I used on that banner, like, Jesus is you, or something like that. And it was, and looking back on it now I'm projecting my understanding of divinity, but I think that there was an element of recognizing divinity in others. And so I don't know, that's something that continues to resonate with me. And
that's probably, that memory and that experience seems very resonant with Unitarian Universalism. Maybe experiences like that probably planted a seed for you to end up finding the first Unitarian church, maybe.
I think so. And, ultimately, because, in my 20s, and then as I met Mo, my wife, we would often talk about how it'd be great if we could find a community that wasn't necessarily driven by doctrine or a
Hmm.
theology, but there was a community that was still grounded in, what I would later understand as these humanist principles, where there's no underlying mythology, or if there is, we just recognize the wisdom in that mythology as it relates to how we can become better people and foster a strong community, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think, and I would always say, like, I love my Catholic experience. I just wish I could have that without the doctrine,
Yeah.
without the hierarchy, without the politics, and uh, so yeah, you're totally right. And I think though, later after college, though, I've definitely, I try to open myself to awe and wonder, and there've definitely been some other pivotal moments, and I think we were talking about it where, I was at a crossroads after college, and I thought I was going to go to New York and try to pursue just acting, straight up acting. But I remember like driving home late at night, coming from my friend's house where I these were like my improv buddies and my acting buddies, and they were moving to Chicago. And we had done some videos together, and we were kind of forming this collective, artistic collective. And but they were going to go to Chicago, I was going to go to New York. But I just remember driving in the middle of the night to my house, where my parents' house, where I was living. And there was just, yeah, kind of like this epiphany. And it's been a rare, I feel like that was a rare moment where just like my whole body felt it, and was like, and it was so resolute and confident. And it was like, no, I'm going to go to Chicago. I'm going
Yeah.
to make a production company. I'm going to be with my friends. And I remember going home to my parents' house and writing a letter to my parents for whatever reason.
Wow.
It was like, Mom, Dad, I've decided not to move to New York. I'm moving to Chicago. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. Uh, this is the beginning.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever really done such a grand gesture like that. But yeah, something moves me, compelled me, and that has made all the difference.
Yeah.
I moved to Chicago, and everyone finds their way, but that led me to meeting my current wife, who has changed my life,
Yeah.
beyond words. And it's yeah. So those are some spiritual moments that I think have defined
Yeah.
my
Thanks
life.
for sharing that. Yeah. It's crazy, the butterfly effect of big decisions like that, and it's impossible to know what your life would have, how it would have unfolded if you would have moved to New York. And when you had that epiphany, did you feel any sensation of like, this is going to sound weird, but I'm asking it because I've had experiences where I truly felt like there was a vivid voice talking to me. I know that sounds kind of corny, but that was my direct experience. I don't know how to conceptualize what that was, but I truly, truly, actually three specific times in my life, there was a very clear voice, not outside of me where I could hear it with my physical ears. It was more internal, but it was definitely a voice, and it had that certainty that you're talking about. It had this kind of like, this is what is happening. This is what you should do, kind of thing. So did you have any sense of that at all?
I definitely had the certainty. And I think maybe the voice just was my own, but I can definitely
Right.
appreciate yeah, that like unique experience of of a confident voice, or
Yeah.
the voice of certainty.
Feels good, right?
Yeah, yeah. My concern now is that I still have that voice of certainty, but I'm not as sometimes I'm not as brave or courageous to listen to it, or
Yeah.
or I think there are a lot of there can be a lot of hemming and hawing now for me, because I think I have a vision for myself, but then it's like I've seen enough of the world, or experienced enough of the world now, where I'm like, well, I could do that, but I know this will happen, and
Right.
this will trip me up, and
Yeah.
it's not gonna be an overnight thing. This is gonna take a lot of work to build to that point,
Right.
and so, yeah, sadly, I feel like in a way, when I was in my early 20s, there was kind of a, ignorance is bliss, the world is my oyster. And so, yeah, and and, maybe we'll go into this, but, you were so kind to interview for my class, Creativity and Ideation, and your insight was phenomenal. But we talked about kind of these indicators, or like sparks of joy. I think we
Hmm.
talked about it specifically in the category of creativity. But as I've, focused on creativity and like how to create your own process for being creative, I am trying to be more mindful and aware of like those maybe intuitive moments where you respond to something, and a visceral response, and it's like that's an indicator, like maybe
Yeah.
this is the path that you
Yeah.
go down, or at least sniff it out a bit.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
and
I
I
love
guess the reversal of that is if you feel like no, that's something's
right.
weird there.
Right.
I try to be conscious of that too.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I feel like a lot of those intuitive moments for me that send me in a specific creative directions, a lot of times it's the books that I'm reading. It sounds nerdy, but
No,
for
no.
years, I mean, it's been this mysterious thing where um yeah, just certain books I read, and any person who reads a lot of books knows the feeling of like one book will lead you to another book, or you read one author and then you kind of get a reference to this other thing, and so you check that out, and then it's just kind of this never ending process of like discovering new things through through books that you're reading that send you to other books. And so yeah, in the last couple of years especially, I've just um through books that I'm reading, and then through intuition while I'm journaling, a lot of times if I'm just free journaling, free writing in my journal, these discoveries will start getting made, and I'll kind of reach certain clarity about like creative projects that I want to pursue and stuff like that. And and then sometimes I'll start reading a book and it won't spark any joy, and I'm like, there's no reason for me to read this, because the like you were saying, the flip side of it is like you got to listen to that too.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah.
I just wanted to say, like, yeah, writing, for whatever, there is a mystery to me for when it comes to writing, because I'll have ideas in my head, and I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds good. And I'll try to figure it out, but think it's a little hazy. But once I like can get it on paper, yeah, there is a cool mystery to it, where I don't know, the clarity comes through that process,
Yes.
through the writing. And yeah, I wish I was a more, I admire your journaling, because I
Hmm.
feel like you found your process, and it's really sharp and focused. And I feel like I've taken inspiration from you, and I have a few different journals now, but
Nice.
the habit of journaling, I think, is still a little messy for me. But
Yeah.
when I do it, it like, I don't know, it really, yeah, it's weird how that clarity comes once you get
Yeah.
into the flow of things. So,
Yeah. I mean, even my, when I started to journal more, even that, that new practice that I developed a few years ago, that in itself was kind of seemingly like it came out of nowhere in a way, you know. I had kept a journal for years, but I mean, I remember my mom gave me a journal when I graduated from high school, and it took me like 4 years to fill that thing out. You know what I mean? Like I had a journal, but I didn't really write in it that much. And but then in 2019, it was just one of those, this spontaneous shift where I just felt called or something to start writing in a journal a lot. And then ever since then, it's just been, I go through little waves. Sometimes I'll have a few weeks where I don't really write in my journal at all. But I always feel better when I'm writing,
yeah,
whether it's explicitly like poetry or whether it's my journal or any sort of writing of any kind, just is very therapeutic. I mean, it's healing for me.
yeah, I agree. Yeah, but like you said, there's, yeah, mystery to it. Like I don't know what's
Hmm.
going on there. Just to externalize, to see it outside of yourself,
Yeah.
offers a new, I don't know, a new direction, and it allows you to kind of like break through that, maybe that wall that's
Yeah.
inside. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's,
I know
it's
for
pretty
me, I mean,
cool. Pretty
if
cool.
it just, if I'm just in my head, then I don't reach the same level of clarity as I do if I'm writing. And so, yeah, just the
It,
act of it is, it connects dots, that wouldn't
yeah,
be connected otherwise.
it almost lets you like unload that like first thought maybe.
Hmm.
So your brain's like, okay, we got, it's safe. It's safe now. I'm gonna think of the next thing for you. And
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, just one of those cool things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good little segue because I wanted, my next question was gonna, uh, well, my next question is, what is it that first kind of got you interested in theater, comedy, acting, and writing? Just the creative life. What pulled you in that direction?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question. I feel like I've had that instinct. I don't know, it was an instinct and innate almost.
Hmm.
Since I was a little kid, I, I think, there were like home videos when I was like 4 or 5, and I was
Nice.
performing for the family and trying to make people laugh,
Hmm.
and yeah, so on some level, yeah, that's a mysterious thing too. Just I don't
Hmm.
know where that came from, but
Yeah.
I think I think maybe it was modeled. So I do think there's some nature there, but I
Hmm.
think within my extended family, I had funny aunts, had a really funny uncle that really influenced me,
Hmm.
and I think you know I think they're I'm just actually assuming or hypothesizing, but I think when it comes to comedy, when it makes there there's there's a component of like wanting people to pay attention to you, but I think there's, for me, also the joy of making someone feel good.
Yeah.
And but then there's also a cerebral component of problem solving,
Hmm.
um, and I think creativity is all about, or one angle of it is problem solving, but the joy of taking one thing, taking another thing, and then somehow putting them together in a way that elicits this response,
Hmm.
that's also very satisfying. And
Yeah.
I think part of what I teach, and by no means am I an expert, but I more and more I've come to appreciate kind of Aristotle's um, analysis of this stuff. Not to get too heady about it, but he talks about how for humans, it's a pleasurable experience to gain understanding or to
Mm-hmm.
gain knowledge for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I'm sure we could go into a spiritual direction. We could also go into like a biological direction.
Yeah.
We've evolved to this, whatever our hardwiring is, we've evolved to this point where we love to understand things, and also we love gaining knowledge.
Yeah.
And then we also, I think we enjoy suspending ourselves in a state of disarray, but then part of that is like returning to a balance.
Yeah.
So I think comedy is that process, and sometimes it's just in a joke where you create tension and then you return to it. So for me, I think it has been that joy of like, how do you surprise people? How do you
Yeah.
create that tension? And then like, how do you offer the joy of returning to a state of balance?
I love that.
And I think we talked about that in our creativity interview, like
Mm-hmm.
surprise is such a fun, or, in the right context, it can be a really wonderful thing. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, to be honest, I haven't thought about it, like what brought me to that place.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I think just on a very visceral level, yeah, a sense of pleasure, a sense of joy, and then there are certain moments where a sense of transcendence too, and
Yeah.
like all those feelings are wonderful, and I do feel grateful and, dare I say, blessed
Mm-hmm.
that I've been able to experience those things through performance, through art, through music. I think some of my most transcendent moments have been through, I was a choir boy, and just like I had some cool opportunities to like sing at the Kennedy Center in a giant choir, and we sang the Messiah together for Christmas. And I don't know, I some of those experiences are possibly the most religious experiences I've had. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a full spectrum, I think.
Yeah, you've had a lot of, I mean, you've done acting, you've done writing, you've done comedy, you've done music. So you have a wide range of skills with that sort of thing.
Yeah, I feel grateful again.
Yeah.
But I think it is, it's drawn by that voice, like what is, and I feel grateful that, maybe my parents kind of pushed me a little bit.
Yeah.
I showed an inkling of, but I also feel grateful that, yeah, I don't know, that I push myself to a certain extent to, like, not to be because choir is not the coolest thing, and sometimes theater isn't the coolest thing, and I definitely got caught up in the popularity game in high school and stuff, and tried to do lacrosse, but at the same time, I still didn't let my love of performance, love of music, I didn't let that go. And I think I tried to be like, how can I do all these things? But yeah, it's yeah, I don't know, it's not always easy.
Yeah, this I think about this idea of personal dharma, and basically my sense of that is like, basically just kind of following that voice or following that intuition, the things that actually do spark joy, the thing, and using your inner resources, using your skills to, make your life what you want it to be. Not forcing a direction that doesn't feel authentic to you. Another way that I think about personal dharma is kind of the intersection of like the nature nurture thing, I guess, too, where it's like the way I think about karma is it's the original definition is basically just the law of cause and effect,
Mm.
it's like these days we think people use the word karma, and usually it's always associated with bad karma. It's like, oh, we think about it as like a bad thing or a punishment or something like that. But
Right.
if we think about karma, it's just the simple reality of cause and effect, and we think about all of the endless factors that make us who we are on biological level, on a cultural level, on every, on all the physical levels. And then there's that mysterious component of not really knowing, like you're saying, not really knowing exactly why you always loved performing or something like that, and or why I always loved language and stuff. So there's a certain aspect of it that I can't quite explain with the conceptual mind, but where all of those things meet, I feel like that's our personal dharma. So it's almost like our dharma is what we do with our karma or something. It's like Jean-Paul Sartre has one of my favorite quotes about freedom. He says that freedom is what you do with what's been done to you, you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
and so that's similar to what I'm saying, I guess.
Yeah. No, I
um
like that.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm kind of processing out loud, but kind of like, the external, the karma, the nature or the nurture. Uh, how does that help you uh, unleash your authentic self? Or I think we mentioned
Hmm.
we were
Hmm.
talking about Whitman last night. Like,
Yeah.
how do you reveal, or how do you take that input and then the output is your full true self, I guess.
Right.
I don't
Right.
know if that, but I listened to your interview with Reverend James Ford, and uh, I liked how he acknowledged like kind of the luck of the draw. Like
Yeah.
you're kind of, yeah, you're this blank canvas with innate potential,
Hmm.
but it also, like, who you become relies on where you land, or what you're filtered through. uh
Yeah.
but
How
yeah,
you're
how do you
thrown
take,
into the world. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, it is a fascinating thing. And I mean, these are, this is the stuff of human existence and the
Yeah.
human condition.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess returning to Aristotle, like the pleasure of talking about these things. Like
Yeah.
there's something that lights up when there,
Absolutely.
it's not, but it's not that, sweet pleasure, or that, sugary pleasure.
Hmm.
There's something else. There's a different feeling when you talk about it. But I don't know. It's,
Yeah, and part of it kind of relates to what you were saying about how comedy can kind of put you in this suspended space where you don't exact all the dots are not connected, but then by the end they do connect. And there's like, I think the pleasure related to even conversations like this, or related to just the act of discovery or understanding or gaining knowledge. It's like, it's that there's both this mystery and the unknown, but then there's when you connect, certain dots get connected. So it's like the pleasure comes from both the connecting of dots, but also that suspension in the unknown, and I think where those like coexist, that's what makes me, that's what sparks joy for me. And I guess it also relates to the awe and wonder that you've referenced.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. I mean, really, for me, the idea of catharsis, I'm really pushing Aristotle here, uh, but that's what kind of resonates with me, and that's the luck of the draw. That's what I've been
Hmm.
exposed to. But
Hmm.
the purification of emotions, like that cleansing of and I don't think I fully understand Aristotle's interpretation of catharsis, but uh, in my mind, like when you watch a great film, or you see a great play, or you read a great poem, or you read a great essay, like, yeah, you're suspended for a moment, and then you lock into that natural state, or there's a trigger, there's a mechanism in the narrative or in the poem, in the form, in the expression, that locks you back into a natural state. You have that resolution, and that's when you have this cathartic experience where
Yeah.
you purify your emotions, and it's
Yeah.
a pleasurable experience.
Yep.
It's a feeling, it's a sensation. And I think
Yep.
I've tried to really be mindful of what is happening physically, like physiologically, like expansion of the chest, and like
Hmm.
maybe your throat tightens, and crying, or
Chills and tears. Yeah.
yeah. So it's, I don't know, again, it's I definitely don't have any crystallized or like definitive,
No, those are some great ideas.
but yeah, I don't know, it's all fascinating stuff. So
Well, before I ask you my next question, you mentioned Aristotle, and you mentioned, just kind of analyzing comedy and stuff. Have you ever read the philosopher Henri Bergson?
no, I haven't. Yeah, yeah.
He's very under recognized these days, but he was writing in the late 1800s, maybe into the early 1900s. And at the time, yeah, into the early 1900s. Um, at the time, he was like the most famous philosopher, most famous living philosopher. He was very, very famous, and
Wow.
it's kind of weird that he got tucked. He's gotten kind of pushed underneath the radar
Yeah.
now, but he's amazing. He actually, in the last several months, he's one of the most interesting philosophers to me. But he's
Oh,
got a
wow.
whole book about comedy. He's got a whole book about humor, and it's really, really insightful. So I recommend. I think you would enjoy it.
Yeah, I would love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
again, that's so like the luck of the draw. Like, I wonder what wisdom has been articulated in the past that has been lost, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
could have maybe altered the path of humanity if we had.
Yeah, not to mention things like the burning of the huge library in Alexandria back in the day and stuff like that, all
Right,
these um, huge troves of texts and temples that were destroyed and stuff like that.
right.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
So I just briefly, I kind of have a romantic thought, and
Hmm.
that I feel like the more humanity progresses, quote unquote, the farther we get away from the truth. And I don't know. Again, it's kind of just maybe more of an indulgent romantic thought, but like I came across a quote of Goethe that said, like, seek the truth, the old truth.
Hmm.
And I don't know, for whatever reason that resonates with me, that
Yeah.
uh, sometimes I feel like we're trying to like improve upon
Yeah.
our knowledge base, but sometimes I wonder if we just, instead of moving forward, if we need to like go deeper and deeper. But
Yeah. No, I feel you. Yeah, I'm very drawn to like ancient history and ancient philosophy and old like mystery traditions and stuff. And I think that, yeah, I think there was a lot of wisdom that, a lot of old wisdom that is still relevant today. And, I mean, some people say, yeah, we've evolved so much like technologically and stuff like that, but we haven't necessarily evolved spiritually, which, I mean, I could see somebody arguing both sides of that. Um,
yeah, it's interesting because something actually, I just want to give a plug for your Transcendentalist study group
Thanks.
at First Unitarian Church of Los Angeles, for all the listeners out there. But this idea of direct experience, and yeah, again, it might be too romantic a notion, but earlier, our ancestors, ancient civilization, they had nothing but direct experience. Or, I'm
Mm,
going to fumble through this, but it's like all they could do was direct experience. And I feel like maybe they were more in tune to this, the stars, the
nature.
sky,
Yeah.
nature, and perhaps they didn't have like the detailed scientific knowledge that
Right.
we have, but I just wonder if like there was an understanding that was much deeper and rich than what we
Mhm.
have now. And
We don't have tons of time, and I want to get to a couple other things.
yeah,
I wanted to ask you about, because this is something that when I first met you, you were working at the Thomas Mann House,
yeah,
and I never have really gotten a chance to talk much about that with you. How did you end up there, and what was
yeah.
it like?
I mean, it's very circuitous, like how how I got there. But you know, I guess I'll start from like as an actor, as an artist, always looking for day jobs. And I lived in Chicago with Mo before I moved to LA, and I kind of had this weird path of social media. Like I kind of got a temp job like years and years ago, and then kind of evolved in this office to be like a communications manager, which
Hmm.
I feel is like what artists become in the corporate world. But
Yeah.
so I had that kind of resume, and then I was also actively making videos with my friends. I got my MFA in screenwriting, and I was producing short films, videos there, and so a comedy group in Chicago, an all-female sketch group that I did a lot of work with and I performed with. They got this miracle job of producing a television show here in Los Angeles. Um, and going into their second season, they invited me to be like their online social media or their on-set social media producer.
Hmm.
But it meant Mo and I had to move out to LA. So we went for it. And LA had always been on our radar. We were both actors, creators, and we're like, you know what, LA, let's do it. Let's go to that
Nice.
next level.
Yeah.
And so when I was here, I was building more of a social media reputation. And a friend from Chicago who's a film composer, he met the program director uh, of the Thomas Mann House, Dr. Nikolai Blaumer, at the church that they both went to, a Lutheran church.
Hmm.
And Nikolai was looking for a social media consultant for the Thomas Mann House because it was this burgeoning program. The Thomas Mann House was Thomas Mann's former residence when he lived here in the 40s and 50s, exiled from Nazi Germany. And, this is where he set up base to write some, epic work and be a
Hmm.
pro-democratic voice. So anyway, the German government bought this house like 3-4 years ago. Nikolai was in charge of like really developing the program, and he needed social media assistance. So they reached out to me because we had a common friend,
Nice.
and so I went to interview, and they liked me, and I did the social media consultant stuff for them. But then they're like, we like you so much. Would you want to be like a part-time program assistant here?
Hmm.
And I was into it because it really is a magical place. And I hope I hope the UU Church can actually go up there at some point.
Yeah, we should.
But but yeah, super inspiring. And I got to meet, intellectuals from Germany, and
What
just
kind of programs were you directing?
so they have a fellowship program where it's, fall, spring, chapters where they they elect about 5 or 6 intellectuals, journalists, scientists, creative, minds from
Hmm.
Germany. They bring them out to LA to live at the Thomas Mann House.
Mm.
And they engage with the LA surroundings, with
Mm.
California, with, America as a whole.
Hmm.
The kind of the boilerplate mission for the organization is to promote transatlantic debate between America and Germany.
Cool.
And so, I think they feel right now there's a strong charge because of the rise of fascism and autocracy and nationalism across the globe. Like there is kind of a focused effort to push against that and just to bring in as many, wise voices to address these issues.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, Thomas Mond represented that pro-democratic voice. I think he went on a journey himself, but ultimately became pro-democracy.
Yeah.
And became a cheerleader for it, a very eloquent, powerful cheerleader.
Hmm.
And but he was a member of the First Unitarian Church of Los Angeles, and that's, I started working at the Thomas Mann House, and then that's what led me to the church in LA. So,
Yeah, that's what I thought was the case. So just the fact that he had been a member there and you were inspired by him, and maybe you heard some about the history of the church, that's what got you to try out the church, huh?
yeah. Again, Mo and I, for like years, we'd have conversations once in a while. It's like, I wish we could go to a community that like meditated or like,
Yeah.
again, focused on maybe humanist ideals. And then Mo was really looking for a place to do service. Like she wanted kind of a formalized place to do service. Yeah, to
Yeah.
volunteer. And so the Unitarian Universalist Church had like, there were kind of seeds planted. Like we, for our honeymoon, we stayed at a bed and breakfast in San Francisco after we went to Yosemite, which was awesome.
Nice. That sounds like a good time.
Yeah, great place. But the bed and breakfast owner, she used to be a Unitarian minister.
Mm.
And she kind of like, we had a great conversation with her, and we kind of got little hints of what it was about. And I was like, wow, yeah, okay, maybe we should check that out. But, we went back to Chicago, never really looked into a UU church. But when it came up again, when I was working at the Thomas Mann House, and I just looked at the principles, and I looked at the sources that influence those principles. And then I looked at the history of the church itself, and I was just like, whoa, this is,
Yeah.
And I think for me, a faith community, I was always looking for a thread of intellectualism, but also maybe a political angle, but then just like, yeah, humanist ideals. And when I read the principles, I'm just like, wow, this is like checking off every box. So Mo and I went to a service one day, and it just, it's a small ragtag group of wonderful people. But yeah, it had ritual, but it wasn't grounded in mythology. It was just like, we're present here in this room, and these are rituals that help us focus and meditate on I don't know, community, our humanity, and maybe our spiritual development as well. And to be honest, we were hooked right after that.
I like you guys was fortunate to find the church too, and maybe in some ways what led me there was a little bit different, but nevertheless, I've been drawn to spirituality for so long, and I didn't ever think I was gonna attend a church of any kind again, as far as regular. I mean, when I go home and visit my parents, I'll go to church with them sometimes and stuff, but like, I never thought I was gonna be a member of another church. And I had heard about Unitarianism through Emerson, when I got into him in college. So I was familiar a little bit, but I didn't know much about Unitarian Universalism. And You know, that's a whole long story that we'll have to talk about another time. But I was similarly refreshed by just how unique the community and the church is at First Unitarian Church. And you know, for me, it was just finding a spiritual community that wasn't, you know, like you said, that didn't have dogma or doctrine or even, you know, one singular holy text or anything like that. It was I couldn't believe that it even existed, to be honest. I was like, wait, this really exists? And
Yeah.
so I've been extremely grateful for that. And so related to that, you know, and for our last few minutes, I just wanted to read you this quote from UUA.org, Unitarian Universalist Association website, that is kind of like a statement of UU faith, I guess. And I just want to hear if you have any thoughts about it. It says, our faith, of course, does have requirements. To become a Unitarian Universalist, you make no doctrinal promises, but you are required to do much more. You are required to choose your own beliefs. You promise, that is, to use your reason and your experience and the dictates of your conscience to decide upon your own theology, and then you are asked to actually live by that theology. You are asked to take your chosen faith very seriously. In a very real sense, all theology is autobiography, is it not? Our experience, real and vicarious, is what informs our sense of reality, our internal picture of the way the world works, what our values are. We believe what we know is true, that is, our felt knowledge, not what we are told is true. In the final analysis, how can a person who wishes to live with integrity do other than this?
Mm. Yeah, there's there's a lot there. And I haven't read that quote, but yeah, I mean, I do feel, just, you know, responding in the moment.
Mhm,
Yeah, this idea. Well, first of all, I find it curious, like how we come to our value systems,
mhm,
and I think and what that quote is addressing is like, if when you find a value system or a belief system that you believe will set you on a spiritually enriched path,
mhm.
you know, hold to that. But also when what that quote leans into is like, again, a feel, the feel of it, like we are, what was it, we're
Knowledge.
felt knowledge. Yeah, we know the truth, it's felt. And you know, not to go cerebral again, but kind of where I'm at, what some recent like readings I've done is like,
Mhm,
our feelings come, our intuitions and our feelings come before we reason.
mhm.
And kind of what happens is we try to align our reasoning to that initial feeling.
Yeah, yeah.
um so so something I am interested in is, how do we provide people a value system that, and I'm speaking for myself, like how do I provide myself a
Mhm,
value system
mhm,
where where it informs my feelings in a way that leads me down
mhm.
a path of enrichment and spiritual development
Yeah.
and growth. And so yeah, I think but to be honest, I'm still developing, you know, my quote unquote theology. I think I've
Right.
landed more, you know, the words I'm drawn to now are like secular, humanist,
Mhm,
atheist.
mhm,
But, you know, I think atheist is kind of a charged word right now.
mhm.
And so, you know, I don't want to be a militant atheist, because actually through the UU church, and this kind of gets back to, in my 20s, I was kind of like, I don't want to go to a church again, kind of like what you were saying.
Mhm,
But now through the UU, my UU experience, Mo and I have been exposed to some wonderful organizations like LA Voice, which is a social justice organization, but it's all interfaith, or it's multi-faith, and it's multicultural, and it's multiracial. And it's like everyone's coming from a different background, and a different belief system, but they're all coming to the table to figure out how can we help each other? How can we progress, society? And for me, it's like, yeah, if you want to devote yourself to a certain theology, do it, but let's all come to the same table and figure out how we can do good in this world.
Amen. Tyler, that's beautiful. I love that.
I'm kind of trying to process that great quote that you
no, that was a perfect response, and I feel like that was a perfect way to close the podcast. So Tyler, thank you so much for doing this. This was super fun. I love talking to you, and we'll have to do it again.
Likewise, man. You're amazing, and I'm always impressed with your knowledge, but also just how you cultivate these really rich conversations. So yeah, thanks, please would love to come back on again, but it's such an honor to be on this time. So
honored to have you here.
Awesome.
Let's talk soon. All right.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Peace.
Have a good one. Bye.
You too.